Good morning, board members. Good morning. Let's call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted. At this time, it is our pleasure to have Tim Sackett, who is chaplain of the local Transport for Christ, with us, and ask Tim to come forward and favor us with an invocation. All rise.
I have to tell you that yesterday on April Fool's Day I had an idea that I was going to come today, and is this a good time to announce that I'd like to filibuster this meeting? Because I brought the whole Bible with me. I filibuster for so
that would have been yesterday.
That would have been yesterday. I should have played that joke on you yesterday, but it's Tuesday. So, we in our churches we just finished our Holy Week, and this morning over at the Hudson Bagel, 5 of us pastors got together and we started praying for this meeting and praying for elections and just praying for our nation and our city all in general, and just thinking that once Easter is over, sometimes you feel like the weight of all that busyness in the church is over, and it's like, now what? And we got to realizing that in our work as preachers, we just do the same thing we did Easter Sunday every Sunday and just continue that. And I thought about how it affects the meeting that you have today. Is you get together once a month and you make decisions, and in leadership you're going to have to carry the burden of the decisions that you make. And I'm sure most of you sometimes agonize over some of the decisions that you can make or cannot make. And so our prayers are for leadership that is strong yet humble. That's Jesus' example. Is that he was the greatest leader we ever knew, but in his humility, he shows us how we can carry on the burden of our decisions and to be examples of good leaders. And I just want to take one more moment before prayer to let you know that we are scheduling a National Day of Prayer on May 2nd. That's a Thursday night, May 2nd. Everyone who's been serving, regardless of the election today, whether you're in or out, you'll get a notice because you've been serving, and we're working on all the notices and public advertising for May 2nd, a Thursday night. So you can mark that down if you're able to attend. We'd love to have you come to the National Day of Prayer. So with all of that, let's go to God in prayer. Father God in heaven, many burdens are in this building today, in the court cases, in the different judges' courtrooms today, and there's a crush of media around the seriousness of the triple murder. But there are other cases that are just as heavy on the hearts of jurors and judges. There are decisions in this room. There could be changes in leadership on Election Day today. Lord, I thank you that you've given us the ideas of freedom and liberty and representation, so that when we think of how other nations go through their changes in their leadership by gun battles and assassinations and takeovers, Lord, you've continued in America to give us a change of leadership through a democratic process that we enjoy, and we should always pray that we can have this same system without bloodshed or violence or any of the other things that happen around the world. But Lord, just as we just don't want to pray and make ourselves feel as though we're so proud of what we have and what we know, but Lord, we also want to be humble in realizing that we all have a need. We need wisdom, and we need to be consoled sometimes over decisions that we make. So Lord, I just pray for this room and for the decisions made today, that everyone will have the courage to stand firm, to help all of us realize that there are difficulties in choosing what is right and wrong. There are difficulties in choosing what is good and bad. But Lord, as these people in this room carry out the decisions for our county, help them to be as well studied as they can on the subject that they're discussing, and again, give them the courage and wisdom to know how they should lead in this room today. So we ask for your favor and your blessing upon our nation, our county, our city, all that we live with. We ask for a blessing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members, would you indicate your presence, please, for the roll? We have 16 board members present, 3 are absent. A quorum has been established. The consent agenda contains 2 items of note. First of all, it does contain the minutes from our previous meeting held on 5 March, and we are announcing the date of the next meeting, which is 7 May. Be reminded that the May meeting is an evening meeting, so that is a 7 p.m. evening meeting on 7 May. Chair would entertain a motion for the consent agenda. Motion from Hood and second from York. Supervisor Asnes.
I'd like to pull item number 1, please.
Item number 1 is removed from the consent agenda for further action. Are you ready?
I need a second.
Supervisor York. Proceed to vote. And the consent agenda, which now was only 1 item, that was the date of the next meeting, has been approved. Minutes were removed from the consent agenda. Are there additions or corrections to the minutes from our meeting on 5 March? Supervisor Asnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On packet page number 3, under presentations or recognitions, number 3, first sentence, I'd like to remove the last 2 words in that sentence and the first 5 in the second sentence. So it would read, Thompson recognized Alicia Miller and Scotty Ard for being instrumental in the county farm historical display. So what I'm doing is removing the sale of the county farmland.
Okay, you're finding it faster than I am.
Item 3.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to amend the minutes as drafted by removing the language. And this is packet page, what, 3? Has everyone found this? If you found it, okay.
It's on the second.
Yeah, I've got it. I just meant it as everyone else found it. Any discussion? If not, I assume you're ready to vote on the proposed change in the minutes.
Okay, Travis second.
Wait, would you repeat that one more time for me, please? Back at page 3?
I don't have that in front of me. It is under presentations and recognitions, Supervisor Peterson. Okay. Are you ready for the vote?
Yes.
Proceed to vote on the change in the minutes. and that is approved. And I believe that that approves the minutes. Corp Counsel, I don't think I need a separate motion on the approval of the minutes. This approves them. Thank you, Supervisor. At this time, we have a portion in the agenda for any comment from any member of the public who wishes to comment on an item not on our agenda today. We are not able to respond if anyone so comments, but is there any comment from any member of the public on any item not on our agenda? And seeing none, we will move on. We do have two presentations this morning, and I will ask our administrator, Pat Thompson, to comment on the first one, the National Telecommunicator Week.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It gives me great pleasure to read a proclamation which will be signed by the chairman of the board and myself, honoring telecommunicators throughout the United States of America. Whereas Congress and the United States, Congress and President of the United States have established the second week of April as National Telecommunicators Week. And nationwide, we have over 200,000 telecommunicators nationwide in the United States. And whereas a group of dedicated public safety telecommunicators serve St. Croix County, and we have 17 full-time dispatchers in our telecommunications center. And whereas National Telecommunicators Week has been observed in the United States since 1991, and whereas the County of St. Croix considers the services of our public safety telecommunicators to be of vital interest to the citizens of St. Croix County, and also is in line with our mission statement of the county board and our strategic plan. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our law enforcement, fire, and EMS personnel, and by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety. And just as a side note, I usually on my lunch hours, I'm down in the sheriff's office and I'm hearing radio traffic from our dispatchers, and almost on a daily basis I'm a witness to hearing what's going on out in the county. And even over the noon hour, there can be, you would think that might be a slower time of the day, but it's not. And I can only imagine what it's like, you know, at some of the, you know, the wee hours of the day when there's a lot of other activity going on in St. Croix County. So these dispatchers, you know, how it is worded in this proclamation is really true, because they are a vital link to our law enforcement personnel and provide a vital service to our law enforcement personnel and fire and EMS and help them do their jobs. So whereas the services of the public safety telecommunicators is a silent service and their duties are seldom observed or honored by the public, therefore be it known that St. Croix County joins in honoring the telecommunicators whose diligence and professionalism help to keep our county and citizens safe. And Darrell, I'll ask you at the end of the meeting to sign the proclamation. I'll sign it as well, and we'll post that in our 911 center so our telecommunicators can see that St. Croix County honors their service to our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And secondly, as a part of that proclamation, I would like to point out service by one of our telecommunicators specifically. And this telecommunicator's name is Jennifer Kerner. And I'm going to be presenting her with a special plaque in honor of her service. And this is just one example as I pointed out earlier, of the dedication and service of our telecommunicators. On February 20, Jennifer, do you want to come on up at this point? Jennifer is a telecommunicator who has been employed with the county for 3 years. Come on up. You're not going to get out of this that easily. Jennifer has been employed with us for 3 years. She started off as a part-time telecommunicator, and then after 1 year was moved into the full-time status of telecommunicator. And she's also a paramedic for St. Croix County Hudson EMS. On February 24th at 03:21 hours, and I'm guessing that's 3:21 a.m., which is that time period where I said, is there certain, lots of activity going on, even at 3:21 in the morning. Jennifer received a call from a very hysterical female reporting her boyfriend was unconscious and trapped in a vehicle that was on fire. Your ability to take control of the situation empowered the caller to break a window and pull the victim from the vehicle, which was at that point fully engulfed by the time law enforcement arrived on the scene. In recognition of your swift and life-saving actions and for the positive contribution you provide in support of St. Croix County's strategic plan, we hereby present you with this accommodation. And there was some discussion about playing a tape of the actual telephone call, which I had I don't know if it was the honor, but I had the ability to listen to, and I did listen to it. And I made the decision not to replay the phone call publicly because it was a little bit of trauma involved in this situation. But Jennifer, this person was, locked in this car. It was on fire, and there was no ability to rescue this person. And by the time law enforcement arrived on the scene, I don't know what would have been the outcome, but it probably wouldn't have been a life saved at that point. So she instructed the person outside the vehicle to actually break through the car, through the window, and they were able to rescue the person that was locked inside the vehicle. That's kind of the gist of the call, but it was pretty dramatic in listening to. So anyway, Jennifer, on behalf of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors and the County Administrator, I'd like to present you with this plaque and thank you for your service to the county. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, we have a second proclamation. This one is not nearly so dramatic and does not impact an honored county employee, and so I'm not even going to read it in its entirety, but we are proclaiming, and this is somewhat in advance, but we are proclaiming the week of July 13th through 21st as St. Croix River Awareness and Cleanup Week. The reason this is being done now, as opposed to somewhat right prior to the event, is to create awareness of the fact that that is highlighted as a cleanup week. And so I am pleased to put my signature to a proclamation indicating that we are proclaiming that week as St. Croix River Awareness and Cleanup Week. And I will give the original of this to our county clerk, and I also gave a copy to John. Supervisor Malik.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask you to recognize some folks who have appeared for this on a very last-minute arrangement?
May I prevail upon you to do the introductions, sir?
I'd like to do that. Could I ask that they come up and stand by Mr. Thompson, perhaps? This is wholly unexpected to the two ladies, but the gentleman is Paul Bourget. He's a native of Hudson. He grew up in Hudson and went away to Washington, D.C., but later in life found a better course and has come back to Hudson to live. Paul Bourget, and he is on the board of the St. Croix River Association, which is behind this River Awareness Week. On his left is Deb Ryan. She is the executive director of the St. Croix River Association, has been in that position, is the first full-time executive director of the association, even though it's over 100 years old as an association. And next to her is Monica Zaki, who started just a few months ago with the St. Croix River Association. So the two staffers are key component of success of Mr. Bourget. He'll get the credit, but they'll do the work. You know, and for a time, I was also a member of that board, and it has had some very capable people on it, and does at this time. So this summer, the River Awareness Week ought to be quite a thing, and there's always an opportunity to pick up litter along the riverbanks, and whenever people are out there, we encourage them to do that. Thank you for allowing us these moments.
Thank you very much. And Supervisor Malik, I thank you for rescuing me from that faux pas that I almost committed by not recognizing these folks, but I did not.
No,
I had no awareness they were going to be
I
here.
didn't
So.
either until I saw them. I mean, I had invited them, but you know how that is. It's like the governor is invited, but we don't know who's going to show up.
I am not aware of any appointments that we have pending in front of us, and so with that, I will turn it over to Administrator Thompson for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your comment about getting all the credit and having someone else do all the work, I said I can relate to that, so, because I have very competent staff, and, you know, so it was very nice what you did and what you said, and, you know, I know we recognized one employee this morning, the telecommunicator from the emergency dispatch, but, you know, on a monthly basis, I try to recognize employees that are going over and above. It happens all the time, day in and day out. And so, you know, we single out employees occasionally at board meetings, but it happens all the time. Like the pastor said in his opening remarks, you know, we get together once a month as a board and have an official meeting. Of course, we have committee meetings throughout the month as well, but you know, a lot of the work of our employees, dedicated workforce goes on day in and day out. And so you know, in some ways we should honor them all the time for the work they do. And things get done around here, and it's not me that's getting it all done, it's the workforce. And so I think we need to be aware of that, and I'm sure you are as a board, because you see the work getting done through your various committees and everything, but it's a joy to be part of that effort. I'd like to report this morning on where things stand, and this will be a quick update because not a lot has changed since the committee of the whole, because we went through this there, and I'll just go through it quickly again, and if there are questions that have come up, you know, since our last meeting, ask them, and we'll try to address any questions that you might have. Here again is the summary of the auction outcome. The only things that has changed here is that we've highlighted that, is that the closing is scheduled for tomorrow, which I will be at, and there are some closing costs associated with that, legal costs that the county must incur, and so that's the only change to this slide from the committee of the whole. We have the closing schedule for tomorrow and the closing costs. There again, the three projects that the proceeds will help to offset costs for, the expansion of the 911, the vacating the Health and Human Services building and the deconstruction of facilities adjacent to the Health and Human Services building, along with the Health and Human Services building. The first project, the expansion of the 911, relocation of the EOC Phase 1. There again, the RFP for architectural design has been awarded to Wold Architects. The RFP 2 was issued on the 25th of March, and that is for dispatch consoles and related furniture to go along with that. That bid award will be made April 26th. RFP 3 for construction of the actual telecommunications center will take place in July, with construction beginning in August and being completed by November. This is RFP 2, dispatch furniture and consoles. There again, there's schedule for that, as I mentioned. It will include a 6 to 8 person console array for future expansion needs. That it will include an alternate, when I say it will include a 6 to 8 array, there will be proposals asked for what it would take to have a 8 console display versus 6. Yes, Supervisor Malik.
Can you bear an interruption?
Yes.
From time to time, we talk about trying to meld or otherwise associate ourselves with surrounding dispatch operations, and this question of how large a console alternative triggers that to my mind. Can you give us a sense of how many console positions are used in Polk County or Pierce County or Dunn County, which I presume if we were going to find a way to work together with another dispatch organization, it would have to be one of those counties. Do you have a feel for that?
I don't, but Casey is here and he may, so I don't. Casey, in terms of neighboring counties and number of dispatch consoles,
Well, I don't,
was
there's
that?
nothing we do with the information today, but I guess I'm thinking that if the Public Protection Committee and you haven't been thinking about that,
Well,
perhaps you ought to.
We have, and there have been, I would say, preliminary discussions with Pierce County in terms of their telecommunication needs and whether or not there would be interest in working on some sort of merged operation. There have been some discussions on that, and that's why if we go with an alternate bid with the 8 console display, that would certainly, at least I'll turn it over to Casey, but it would more than accommodate, that ability to merge with Pierce. But those discussions are very preliminary, and there's differences of opinion even within the government structure of Pierce County, whether or not they would be interested in that. And so I'm meeting with their administrator. Our sheriff has reached out to their sheriff, Casey's counterpart. So the chairman of the board has had some preliminary discussions with their chairman. And so we're trying to get to the bottom of that to see, but our project cannot wait. We need to continue to move forward with our project and not hold up based on, the inner workings of Pierce County, but hopefully design our center smartly that if and when that point comes that we might be able to work something out with them. Casey?
From a neighboring standpoint, in comparison, Polk County to our north has a 3-position array where they staff 2 full-time and 1 during peak hours for a total of 3. Dunn County has a similar situation. They have a 4-position array. 1 is used for training. 2 are staffed full-time and 1 is for peak hours. So they have a 3 at times as well. And Pierce County to our south is a little unique in that they're jailer dispatchers. So the jailer takes part of their shift and comes over and dispatches, and they have a 1 to 2 person council array, at times 3 if they have special events. But typically they have 1 dispatcher working, and if they get busy, they call in somebody else from the jail.
We have an advisory committee made up of 3 telecommunicators, which were selected by their peers to serve as an advisory committee to the selection committee, just to, bring it down to the actual telecommunicator level. And sometimes when, you're buying a truck or whatever, you need to talk to the person that's going to actually be driving the truck. And I know Tim Ramberg is here. I won't put him on the spot, but, we learn a lot before we go out and spend a lot of money on a piece of equipment. It helps to talk to the people that are going to maintain it and operate it. And so that's why we're using an advisory committee of 3 telecommunicators that can actually say, have you ever thought of this, or have you thought of that, and that might not work. And so anyway, it's a good idea to do that. Vacating the Health and Human Services building, there again, just a note that we're in the process of trying to reallocate space within the Baldwin Ag building for 30 to 40 Health and Human Service employees, and arranging for temporary lease space for the remainder of employees. That bid is out on the street, and it will hopefully, let's see, do we have a schedule on that on the next slide?
Yeah, it's 2 slides.
2 slides. There, that's the schedule for the RFP. The proposals are due on the 19th. The committee will evaluate them and make a recommendation, and hopefully, if all goes well, by first part of August, we'll be moving into a leased facility. I'm going to go back now. So that's the temporary leasing for the remaining HHS staff. We're looking at trying to reallocate space within this facility as well. And then eventually, years down the road, after we have defined what our future space needs are, we will most likely be looking at some sort of recommendation years down the road of some sort of new facility. Don't know where, don't know how, what size and what offices it will accommodate. But a lot of the work that's being now will sort all that out. And that's why this is a good proposal. There is the reallocation of existing space within Baldwin. We have been working with the feds who lease approximately 3,200 square feet in the Baldwin Ag facility. They're currently paying $13 a square foot. That rental rate has not been adjusted in 10 years. So we're working with the feds to reduce their footprint almost by half in terms of first floor space, and reallocating space on the lower level of the facility for storage. A lot of what the feds have, over almost half of their existing footprint, is storage. And so our proposal back to them has been to move half of their space to the lower level for storage, reassign them space on the other side of the building in a reduced footprint, and increasing the rent. It's gone through the local rep, Bob Forrest. It's gone through the regional rep, Randy Cook. It's gone through Brad Paff, the state executive director, and now it's with a lady in Washington who is looking at this, and I have a call scheduled hopefully for this afternoon to talk to her about this. They've punted it all the way up to Washington, and I won't say what, because John's here, I won't say anything, but we'll work through it. There's the schedule. Tim Hood has been helping us as a representative of the county board and the Health and Human Services Board. The deconstruction of the obsolete buildings. We also have an RFP out for environmental studies before we do anything with the facilities in New Richmond, the Health and Human Services building, or any of the other facilities. We need to analyze the environmental issues that are within these facilities before we take them down. Those proposals are coming in as we speak. They're due today. And that project will begin immediately. We'll begin to remediate those hazards and then deconstruct late summer, early fall. Those are the environmental studies for all facilities in New Richmond. There's the schedule. And again, project cost estimates, which you've seen before. Land proceeds and future bonding to complete projects. Yes, Agnes?
So are you getting, how is your response to the RFPs? Are you getting
Which-
a good number
which
of
one?
all of them? I mean, are you getting the firms? Are
We
you
had
getting
good
enough
response with the 911. Two very reputable proposals that were analyzed. We had a pre-bid conference on the space lease, and we had pretty good representation at the pre-bid conference. I was hoping for more, to tell you the truth.
And you can do more to increase interest maybe, can't you, or
Well, it's been
drum it up?
Well, it's been advertised really well. It's, we're doing a good job of getting it out there. I think there's a lot of interest, and just, the representation at the pre-bid conference doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people out there looking at it and might bid that weren't there. You usually just show up to those if you have questions. So, but other than that, things are clicking. Things are getting done, and things are moving along. So there's a lot of moving parts to this project, but I don't see any red flags or alligators in the water at this point. So that's not to say they're not there lurking under the surface, but at this point things look good. Any questions? Okay. The only other item in my report is that, and this was reported at Health and Human Services yesterday, after the meeting yesterday, we had received word that the property incentive application is out there, and they're due on the 15th of April. A lot of work has been done up until this point, and good thing we were working on it, and we're pretty much ready to submit. We will definitely meet the April 15th deadline, and this is for property incentive application for nursing home construction, and those applications are due on the 15th of April, and we'll meet that deadline. That came up after Health and Human Services Board meeting, because it was discussed that morning, and I represented to the board that we hadn't received it, but after the meeting and during the afternoon, we got word. So, yeah, the only other item is that the trial that is underway, you've read all about it. The only thing I'm going to say is that each of the departments that have had a fiscal impact by this trial are keeping track of those costs separately, and the finance department is setting up a separate account for each of the departments to keep track of these costs, and the contingency fund that you authorized in the 2013 budget will be used for offsetting those costs, which will be fairly significant. So, that's it for my report. Thank you. Yeah.
Board members, we have 3 action items in front of us this morning, 3 resolutions that have come through standing committees and are presented to us here for consideration. The first is a resolution approving certain amendments to the Town of Hudson zoning ordinance, and this is on behalf of Bethel Lutheran Church. This is a resolution that is coming to us from the CDC committee, And at this point, Chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Supervisor Ring, second from Supervisor Schockner. Right? Discussion. Supervisor Malik.
Chairman, I'm a member of that congregation. I don't know whether that gives me a conflict of interest or not. I'm only one of whatever it is, 1,200 members or something like that, but, and I can't think of a financial connection, but I guess I want to say if anybody thinks I have a conflict, I'll be glad to.
Supervisor, I think I speak
Not
for the
this
board. I do not see a conflict. You're simply being a member of the congregation. I do not see as any kind of a conflict, and I would not see that that requires you to recuse yourself. If there is any contrary opinion from the board, we could vote on that, but I do not see one. Supervisor Attino.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to let everyone know that I too am a member of that congregation along with Buck. And I didn't think there was anything, but I just want everybody to be aware of that before we do make any motion on this. Thank you.
And my response to you, sir, would be the same.
Thank you.
Discussion. Supervisor York.
One question. I'm a member of Trinity, and Trinity has the facility on the Badlands, or right at 12 on that corner. Is that zoned similar or identical to this? I would just be curious of that on a I don't know basis.
Supervisor, are you speaking to his question, or is yours different?
What's going on?
Okay, I'll come back to you. Right now, we have a question in front of us. I will ask the committee chair to respond to that. We're talking about the zoning question.
Yep.
Are you speaking to the
It
zoning?
is the zoning, it is what's going on with this zoning and also with, it's in general what's going on. And it's,
Okay, I just want to dispose of his question before we
yeah,
move
this
to a
will
different
dispose of that
subject.
question.
All right, then you're
And
recognized.
what this issue is, what the issue that this is solving is, they had, from our understanding and what is being proposed is that the church had bought some land a long time ago, and it was two different zoning. It was zoned two different ways, and all this is doing is putting it under one zoning ordinance, and that's it. It's not changing anything for special consideration for churches or anything. It's just trying to get the land put together, and this is one zone. It was something that was supposed to have been done a long time ago, but the new priest is cleaning it up.
Well, I understand your comment. I guess I'm more alluding to the use of the land and how it's being rezoned. I understand you're getting everything into conformance. My question is the Trinity property zoned going to identical to what they're trying to do here? I guess that's what I'm curious about.
Probably.
Do you want Ellen to speak to this?
Yeah. Ellen, our Community Development Director may know.
Ellen, I'll
the
invite
zoning
you
district.
forward, please, to clarify this. While you're coming forward, just for the board's awareness, there is no Lutheran disagreement here between Trinity and Bethel, right? The chair is hesitant to have the board wander into a Lutheran disagreement here.
With that comment, I guess all I'm saying is it's a similar use. I would hope that they're identical, and that was all I was after on this whole question.
Ellen?
I believe that the institutional use of a church is permitted in both districts, and that the town and the property owners, in the case of Bethel, wanted to clear it up because we usually prefer not to have two different zoning districts on one parcel, and it isn't really one parcel, but it is now once they combined it and owned it. So if you were a little more specific, I've got it up on my computer. I can look up exactly what the zoning is on the other parcel that you referred to, but I would assume that in both cases, that is a permitted use.
Any other discussion or question? Are you ready to vote? Seeing none, board members, proceed to vote. and the resolution is adopted unanimously. Our next item is a resolution that comes to us from the Administration Committee. This is a resolution approving non-exempt employee pay plan and adjustments. Chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Supervisor Peterson and second from Supervisor Osnes. I would just say before we proceed with discussion, just so everyone is aware, passage of this resolution will require a 2/3 vote of the board. This is not a majority vote. This will require a 2/3 vote, just so everyone is aware of that. And it will be a 2/3 vote of the board, not of those present. So those of you quickly doing the math, this simply means that we will need 13 affirmative votes for adoption of this resolution. I'm making no value judgment on that, just so everyone is aware that that is the requirement. We're into discussion, and I will have Administrator Thompson proceed with leading this discussion and joined by HR Director Funk.
I just have a simple question. Why is it a 2/3 vote?
It's a budget amendment.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
We need to transfer funds.
yep. So you've had a copy of the resolution and the fact sheet that went along with it. Tammy and I are just going to do a very short explanation of, how we got here and what we're recommending. The first is just a definition because the resolution is for non-exempt employee pay plan and adjustments. I said, Tammy, the board might not understand the difference between exempt and non-exempt, so we have a definition here. A non-exempt employee, the impact of this resolution to put the non-exempt employees, there's 154 employees in this category, and that's the number of employees that will be placed onto a merged wage grid. And so an exempt employees, there's a definition there, and kind of helps explain what they are. So how did we get here? We used to have two separate unions. The Health and Human Services had a separate union, and the General Government Support Group had a separate union. In 2009, we were mid-year in a 2-year contract, which was 2008 to 2010. Mid-year in 2009, we merged the two collective bargaining units into one, and came up with the name of Scope. That's the name of the merged unit, the collective bargaining unit. After that contract expired in 2010, a new contract, 2011-2012 contract was negotiated. As part of that overall labor agreement, the two parties agreed to do a wage study and to try to merge the two wage grids that, the Human Services and the General Government Support had merged. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a pay plan that was representative of that group and try to merge that with the overall, with the non-exempt or with the exempt wage grid, to kind of bring them together. So in September of 2011, the Administration Committee authorized hiring a consultant, the same consultant who did the non-rep pay plan, to do a job study of those 154 employees. It's not that many positions. I think it's 50-something positions, right? Actual positions, but representing 154 employees. So a consultant was hired, Mr. Carlson, did a job study. Employees were asked to fill out JDQs, which are very detailed questionnaires that kind of get at the essential functions of each position. And then it tries to compare them to internal positions in the county and external positions outside of the county, using comparable counties, both locally and regionally. The job study itself looks at 5 different categories, and this is how jobs are analyzed. I won't go into the weeds any further than this, but those are the factors that the consultant looks at in analyzing each of those jobs. And then they do a market analysis, like I said, with surrounding counties and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, using those kinds of data and benchmark points. This is a copy of the actual merged wage grid. And if you'll see the highlighted area in the middle, the lower positions right here are the non-exempt, which is non-exempt 1 through 7, and then 8, 9, and 10 are the non-exempt, but that's where it actually overlaps with the exempt pay plan. And so this shows how the 2 pay plans were actually merged and providing a consistent, uniform, concise pay plan. Tammy's going to take over for the next section and kind of explain in a little more detail what the impact of placing these employees on the grid will be.
Good morning. If you kind of think through that picture that Pat just showed you, and you have a copy of the non-exempt pay plan, that kind of shows you where at this time particular job titles or job classes are assigned per pay grade. This is what the impact is of taking those 154 employees and placing them on the step. And how that works is that we put them on the step in the appropriate pay grade that is equal to but not less than their current step. So if they fall in between, they would go to that next one higher. Sometimes we find an exact match, sometimes it could be 2 pennies, it could be 50 cents. So that's kind of how this works. So a question that come up at admin we thought might be helpful for this group. There would be 30 of the incumbents or the employees that their current pay is above the maximum of their new pay. So how these pay studies have been consistently applied is they are above max and then are redlined. So they're kind of frozen at that base pay until such time as their pay grade would catch up. There are 112 employees, or obviously the majority, that will fall somewhere between that midpoint, which is step 6, up to the maximum, which is step 14, only moving through those steps through pay for performance, consistently the way we have been applying it for the non-reps. And then there are 12 employees at this time that are in that minimum to midpoint. Now that will continue to move as new employees are hired. Old tenure-based unit wage contracts, everybody had to start at step 1. Everybody moved at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. We now have discretion to truly make a job offer to an employee based on their particular qualifications. We take into account internal equity, but also what is that individual bringing. There are a number of the job titles in the new pay plan that have lower minimums, lower maximums through attrition. If we're able to hire employees at some of those initial steps, still moving them through and pay for performance, there's kind of some savings, and we're still competitive, we're still marketable in those areas. You gonna be the button pusher? Yeah. So just because it kind of gets confusing, we want to make sure you truly understand what's being proposed to you today. Here's 2 examples. So if you take a legal secretary position, which is a group that we have a number of incumbents in throughout the county, if they were at a current hourly rate of $19.26, they fall in between step 6 and 7. So again, because we don't go less than, they would fall at step 7 on the NE6, that pay grade. So their new hourly rate of pay would be $19.61. We then went and calculated, well, what's 3% wage based on the remaining part of 2013? So we assumed an April 15th effective date. There's 1,452 payable hours, but we then actually calculate what an individual's FTE is of what would 3% be of the rest of this year. So for this individual, that's $877.74. The cost, that difference of that hourly increase of 35 cents an hour, which happens to then be base, we calculate what's the cost of that? What is that employee already gaining just by being placed on the grid? That's $521.16. So because they happen to gain that, that is actually minused from that 3%. And so the one-time payout that that employee would see is the difference, or that $356.59. Now, our next example is a custodian. Their wage range, actually, the wage range in general goes down significantly. So current hourly rate of a custodian is $19.39. They will be redlined at that rate of pay because they are above the pay range for that, which is the NE2. Their 3% wage calculation, same thing for what's remaining in 2013, is $867.90. There's no cost to placing them on the step because they're really frozen at that hourly rate. So they would get that entire 3% paid out, but as a one-time, non-base, accumulating $867.90. Any questions about that? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I do still. So you have to help me here on understanding this. So why does the custodian who's already max get the one-time payout of 3%?
It's been the consistent recommendation, by the consultant. I mean, we've only obviously implemented the study one time, but it was to really acknowledge you're placing people onto this new wage grid. You're moving them to pay for performance. You hold people harmless, which is why you don't really reduce their pay, but yet their future now is they're frozen in pay, other than they can earn merit through pay for performance, but it has been to continue to treat that entire group, so all 154, no fault of their own, that the job study says, geez, you're above market, you're below market, and that's why we've recommended that same consistent 3% as was done for the non-reps who are above maximum.
Did that market study include Washington County? Or what did we look at in that study?
Which, the last scope study?
Mm-hmm.
Washington County, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
We did a little bit of analysis of Minnesota, but because if you think about that large pay plan, the original one for non-reps, the administration committee at the time had decided to not include Minnesota data. At that time, this was a little bit before Act 10, so Minnesota employees were paying their own para. County employees in St. Croix were not paying Wisconsin retirement, and so Minnesota wasn't looked in. We've looked at Minnesota for this group through the Bureau of Labor Statistics and some county benchmarks, but it will really be through an analysis of the entire pay plan that I will need to do. It's been 2 years since we did the non-reps. Are we still competitive? Any ongoing market adjustments or analysis, which could be very specific to a job title. So we did look at like Ramsey and Washington, but it's primarily based off internal evaluation, those points. So each pay grid has an evaluation point band that fits in there, if that makes sense. And so a variety of job classes that are similar in terms of those 5 categories get placed on there. And people generally move internally. So we look external data, but a lot of this pay plan is about market. We do look at the 4 surrounding counties, or the consultant did, I shouldn't say we. We worked with the union in trying to understand those benchmark positions were the right positions benchmark, because we want to be competitive. We want to be able to recruit and retain staff. And so that's an ongoing job that I will need to, and with my office, continue to look at. Are we able to really recruit staff at some of those beginning steps? Or are we always coming to midpoint or above? Then we might not be competitive. Are we losing a number of staff? Is it because of salary? Now we're not competitive in terms of retention. Want me to call them? Is that right? Okay, Fred?
By your own example of the custodian again, you mentioned they then are, the new rate classification for them is lower. So the form of correction then that the county's taking is nobody will be pushed backwards, and that will be addressed through attrition or
Correct.
Whenever they should retire or move on or get a different job or something.
Yep,
That is the method of correction that you have built into the system.
Yep, that new individual at 1939, if we go higher, our hiring range for custodian goes from 1201 to 1647, so significantly less. Agnes?
So what we're looking at is just salary or the hourly compensation. So as part of a total compensation package, we also offer retirement and health care. Do we as a board get involved in looking at that total compensation at all? And are we competitive? How do we look at, I mean, I think the goal is we want to be competitive.
Absolutely, yeah.
How does that fit into this decision?
Well, these costs do include fringes, which are part of the retirement and other taxes, Social Security, just because that's a piece of it. Every year at budget time, obviously, we're looking at health insurance because we're self-funded. What's our policy? What's the correct premium split? We bring, definitely, like we did the premium policy to the administration committee last year, which kind of looked at how we're managing the fund and how do we calculate things. So you are part of that. Wisconsin retirement, we don't really have any input into that. The state sets what the rate is. It's now required employee, employer.
So anyone in Wisconsin in a public position would get that same thing? I mean.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, and they deem who's eligible, how many hours an employee has to work for at least a year on an ongoing basis to be participating. People can't opt out of retirement for employee or employer. It's a requirement. If you meet the criteria, you're part of that. Life, long-term disability, which the county provides, health insurance, the way we have it, there are, additional costs in the budget that we look at each year. Our dental insurance is available to employees, but the county does not currently pay anything for that. It's entirely funded by the employee and voluntary at their discretion, so. Yep, Tim?
Okay, I understand the slides, I think, and what's up there. I'm still having trouble with why the 3% on top. Because to me, we've got to get this right by going to pay for performance, because we have employees that expect that.
Yep.
So I want to get it right. So if are we always going to then add a 3% one-time bump to our next employee group that comes on? Or we have highway, right, sheriffs, so we're going to go to that. So is that just a standard now? We're going to come up with a pay grid, and then we're going to put a 3% bump on everybody every time we do this? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, we are trying to be consistent.
Yeah.
And I think you've heard that word, and that, that's why I'm recommending this, is that, we've started down this track, and I want to be consistent with all the employee groups. And, really, I think we need to look at, this recommendation gets us on track, gets us where we need to be. And yes, we have to deal with highway, and we will be dealing with law enforcement, those groups. But what I need to do is look at where are we going with our total compensation plan, which is pay for performance. Once we get these employees, these 154 employees, which is a sizable component of our overall workforce, we get them on this merged wage plan going forward, is all going to be pay for performance. And so that's the goal. Yes, we may get into, is 3% the right number, or, should it be 2 or whatever. I'm not recommending we stray. We've started down that path. Let's be consistent with this group and not lose sight of the big goal, the overarching goal for compensation, which is fairly unique in local units of government. We're one of the few counties in the state that has gone full force, full throttle with all non-union and union employees. And so to do this right, we agreed to a wage study. We implemented a wage study and used that 3% to get those employees on, back in June of 11 when the county adopted the management pay plan. Now we're doing it with this group. I'm recommending that we stay consistent and not lose sight of the goal. The big prize at the end of is to get everybody on pay for performance, and this will do it.
So what you're saying then, so I understand.
Yeah.
Is it may not be 3% with the next group. You're going to do a wage study for the highway and sheriff maybe, and so you're going to determine what that one-time raise would be, or no?
Do you want to?
Or it'll just be 3%?
Well, the sheriff's union, WPPA, obviously has a different ability to negotiate as public safety. And so we've been working with that group. And if you, those kind of highlighted grades that were on that larger one is actually where we're looking at trying to pull that particular group of employees into the same wage grid. Again, trying to have a comprehensive pay for performance. Will they have a reasonable expectation that this same process would be handled and occur for them in terms of implementation? I believe yes, but we're basically putting them onto that grid by internal information and evaluation of their jobs. Highway union, we've already moved towards pay for performance. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to address a wage grid for them. They're paid very uniquely. There's a pay rate for a type of job or a type of equipment that I might be doing, and I may have multiple pay rates. So trying to identify, still wanting to give those employees an opportunity if, they should be able to, because they're not above the maximum, to achieve a base if they earn it through pay for performance. Their current system just has one pay rate. There aren't steps. So that one is taking a little bit longer, and I'll work with the highway commissioner. We got to take things like prevailing wage rate into account of how we put them on there. But that's the idea, that eventually they have either the same or very similar look of pay for performance. So all employees eligible for pay for performance would be in this group on this pay plan. So, Buck?
It seems to me that there are two questions that ought to be answered in this context, and the first one of them is rather obvious and probably comes along in a subsequent slide. What's the cost of this?
On your resolution, the total cost of implementing the resolution as it's presented to you is about $216,000, which is wage and fringe. It includes placing the employees in this group onto the wage grid, that offset up to 3%. And to be consistent, when we implemented the non-represented pay plan in July of 11, all of the cells were not populated. So their midpoint to maximum were not quite extrapolated into being a value. So those employees were kind of placed off to the side. For cleanup, we really need to now place them on the grid, because as you can see from that pay plan, we have now put in values through pay for performance. So the pay plan came, and then we developed.
Tammy,
Yep.
I think what she's referring to are the cells from 7 through 13,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
We're not populated.
Those members of the board that were here in the non-rep study, they were kind of just gray. It just said pay for performance, because we needed to design our system. We've now, through our work group, created our policy, which you've approved. We've created our evaluation tools, how people move. We've now gone back in and kind of populated all of the values, and there's a very standard way that each cell gets
here
populated, so.
To here.
So that's
there's
part of the
a cost
resolution.
for that.
It's all part of that
And that's in the
216,000.
260. Okay,
Yep.
well then the second question I think would be, just as you showed us a slide that showed the people who were over the grid and those who were in each of the subcategories, how did those percentages compare when we did the non-reps?
Very similar. We had 147 employees, I believe, of the non-reps. It was a little bit more. I think we had like 31 that fell below the midpoint. I'm trying to remember how many were maximum. Probably similar to that. The majority were between that midpoint and the maximum, and those are the cleanup that I'm now, some went onto the grid when they earned a base through pay for performance. I absolutely put them onto the appropriate step that they should fall.
And how many were over the top? I think that's the area presumably about which Supervisor Hood is the most concerned.
It's probably
They get 3%.
Yeah, it's probably a similar percentage. I didn't look at all those numbers today, but I can think of a couple job classes. I think there's 5 job classes that encompass those 30 employees that are above maximum. I think we had about 3 or 4 that were probably out at HHS, I believe, that some of our professional staff, or they were really close to the max, but they were above max. So it's a very similar breakdown is how it's kind of falling through, and that's why we've recommended we treat this group of people consistently to how we did the last one.
And it's, it would not seem unusual if we encounter the same sort of distribution as we come to the remaining union groups.
Yep, sheriff's looks about the same. I've done some initial calculations for that. Like I said, highway, because they don't have a range, they have a pay rate, you have to more go, well, what would that become? You know, is that the midpoint? Is that something closer to a maximum? So, but we would be bringing those back, and that's where, you know, Pat's identified the excess sales tax fund as, you know, a place to kind of fund this resolution and upcoming ones, which would be this year.
I consider those answers satisfactory and appropriate justification
Thanks.
for the 3%.
Rick?
Oh, do I need to be on the record with that? Should I just lose it?
Thank you. My question was on the 3%. Of the 159 people that are in this group, when was the last time they would have received a raise in history, or was that all different time periods?
There's different answers to that. Some people could have moved through steps last year because their union contracts still allowed them, if there was a step based on an anniversary date, they could have moved. They hadn't had an across-the-board increase since 2010. We did receive or did agree and negotiate with a 1% base increase that was January of 2013.
Thank you very much. That clarified my question, and I'll go forward along with
All right.
Supervisor Malik with that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep, Chris?
If we extrapolated out, if the cost of this one is 216, if we extrapolated that out to the other unions, what would that number be?
And look to their sheriffs.
Ballpark.
Yep. Sheriff's, the only different, gets to be the fringe is a little bit different because they're protective, so the percentage is a little bit higher, so I didn't run that piece of it. They're a smaller group. I mean, highway and sheriff's together wouldn't be 154. There's, yeah, I'm trying to think, there's probably about 67, 70 guys at the highway. Sheriff's has about 60 maybe. So we wouldn't have the cleanup of the non-reps.
Employees.
Yes, of the non-exempt, I'm just trying to think through. So we wouldn't have all of the pieces, so like on the resolution, the number 4 is a one-time cost. You wouldn't see that again, you'd just have the top ones. I'm trying to go 100,000 maybe, would clean up the other two groups, but it's really ballpark, so don't hold me way to it.
Thank you.
Agnes, did you have another question? Okay. So Pat has up here just the resolution. You have a copy of that that's really kind of walking through. Number 1 is just to implement the wage grid, the pay plan that you see, and kind of implement and put people on there as the way we always have at that first step that gives them the same but not less than in terms of the hourly wage. Number 2 is just really saying that those employees that get placed on there, but it's less than 3%, get that one-time payout. That's the example of that legal secretary. They get a little bit of money. Number 3 is those employees are at the maximum, won't receive any base, any hourly adjustment. They're frozen, but they could get that one-time adjustment. And then number 4 is the cleanup of those non-represented employees that were above the midpoint, below the maximum, and now placing them the same as on number 1 on the appropriate step of the grid that is equal to but not less than their current rate of pay. Yep.
Okay, just so I can get this straight in my mind. So the reason that we're doing this is to be consistent with what we did before. And this is kind of the cost of getting on pay for performance. So we can expect the same thing to continue on with our next negotiations, and it's probably going to cost the county another 100,000. So to get on pay for performance, it's probably going to cost us 300 and some thousand, is what you're figuring.
Of just this group, not looking backwards?
Well, and then looking backwards, what was that?
July of 11, and you were in here, so I'm looking at Tabitha, she's like, I wasn't here.
So
Maybe similar, yeah.
I don't know if, I mean, I said that pay for performance is the is the goal here, but I wouldn't pin all this cost on, this is, because then it's going to get labeled that this is what pay for performance has cost the county. There has never been a wage study.
This was ahead of that.
There has never been a wage study for these, this group of 154 employees. And so I think it was a good idea to do this, and even without pay for performance, I think that it would probably have been good compensation policy and good faith bargaining to do the wage study that was agreed to several years ago and try to get the employees onto a wage grid that was representative of their jobs and the market for those jobs. I think that's good policy anyway. But the extra that we're getting from this is that going forward, advancement through this wage grid, once employees get on there, is not going to be automatic. Prior wage studies, it was just automatic. You go through all those steps, and it's just, okay, if you have a pulse, you would get a step and a percent. Now it's all going to be based on performance, and so I think that's what's important. But I hate to label that this is what pay for performance is costing the county. I think it's more than just that.
And the piece I pointed out to Pat on that was that labor agreement about creating the merge grid was ahead of any concept of pay for performance. We took a lot of time last year trying to make sure we were, thoroughly looking and doing a comprehensive analysis of the positions, putting them in the right group, because you really took, say, a clerical position. You had clerk typists, receptionists, administrative secretaries, 4 or 5 different titles, making 4 or 5 different rates of pay, anywhere from $15 to $19 an hour in the 2 different unions, just kind of how they evolved over time. And what we've done now is to create one class. You're an administrative assistant, and the range goes from $12 to $16.50, or you're a higher level program support specialist. So we've really taken away all these kind of individual job descriptions, job titles, job pay rates, and created a class, which is a much more comprehensive system. It's more equitable across, but it's a lot easier for someone like me in my office to manage and to do a lot of analysis of, are we still competitive? It's always a pay policy or philosophy that we want to set. We could be at the low end of the market, but you'll see what employees you get. We maybe can't be at the very top end, especially at some private sector, but it depends on the job. This is competitive, and I would tell you, I believe this pay and our benefit structure is still very competitive. I don't have any concerns. It's based on very real-time data, so.
I think that this is the right thing to do for the county because it is being comprehensive, it's being competitive, and it's fair, and it's about a system. But when I vote today, I'm anticipating not just these 154 people. I think we as a board have to think of all of the employees. When, and this is an important policy, when will those other groups come onto the grid? Is there a time frame for that?
Yeah, the sheriff's union, we're still in bargaining. I actually just went down last week and did a pay for performance employee session so that they could understand that. With the trial and everything that they're very busy with right now, it will probably be the end of April, beginning of May before we kind of reconvene. And really at that point, it's going to be, do we have agreement, we're coming to you with a contract, or are we at impasse and we're kind of going in a different direction? So I would say in the next couple months. Highway, really, it's not a bargaining, it's just an evaluation, between my office, the consultant. If we choose to utilize him, we have not hired him to do that, and the highway commissioner to kind of look at where would those positions fit in this wage range, in these job classes, and how will people move if I receive a few different rates of pay. So we just got to look at that, because there should still be one base pay for like my primary job. If I happen to get a little bit more money because I drive the dozer once in a while, there's a different way, like a differential to do that. But what's the base job and the base pay that people could reasonably plan for? If I achieve it, again, through pay for performance, not because a year's up, what's my next step? When am I at the maximum and I'm at merit only? So it will be this year. it just, really, kind of really doing that analysis and want to make sure what we do is correct and accurate. Will allow us to recruit and retain the staff, allow a similar process in terms of pay for performance, but not so above market either, so.
So does the action we take today help you position in this, in these negotiations? Does it say that this is the direction we're going, or is it a good faith effort? What does our action today do for those other two? And maybe you can't answer that, the other.
Well, it certainly sets precedent.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say it's helpful, but it sets a precedent, and so I think go into it with your eyes wide open when you cast your vote. That, we will be coming back with the law enforcement group and highway group. It's a smaller group. The fiscal impact won't be as large, but there will be some fiscal impact. So, be aware of that when you cast your vote today, that we will be back. But again, I think it sets precedent, but I think it sets good precedent. And I wouldn't be here standing before you recommending this if I didn't feel it was good public policy and good compensation policy to do this.
Can I say one thing more, Mr. Chairman? And maybe this is an occasion when you ought to speak, given your unique experience on this board from having been on the bargaining committee of the county for so long, representing the supervisors in the negotiations. But I think we should all recognize that there is great value in, as Ms. Ring put it, going onto a system, something that is an objective system. There used to be a time when supervisors received calls from people in different departments saying, it's not fair that Dokes over there is being paid for doing such and such, and I am not. And we would have to respond to that. Well, last round of bargaining, your union thought Dokes ought to get more than you. That's not something county supervisors could control. There was a great deal of, what shall I call, arbitrariness or randomness that infected the system.
They were called reclassifications, if you remember.
Yeah,
We used to
they
deal
go
with
through
all the time.
reclassifications, and they had to be bargained. They couldn't be decided in the HR department on objective criteria or with an outside consultant. And so there were internal disparities that supervisors' hands were completely tied to deal with. They were a function of just how the union chose to back certain things and not back other things. And so they definitely got in the way of employee morale and cross-training. They made it very hard to have any sort of cross-training between departments. They got in the way of lateral transfers when lateral transfers might have made good sense. And so a part of that 3% cost here has, and I'm gilding the lily now, saying again what's already been said, is getting us onto an objective system that gets away from that accretion of awkward, arbitrary, indefensible differences between the pay for different jobs. Did I say it about the way you would have?
I would agree with what you said.
One other question.
Supervisor Artino.
Thank you. My only concern is we as a board had set aside a budgeted amount for the pay for performance program, and I believe that was for all county employees. I'm not sure there was an exact amount. Now, when we add all these other employees in, are we going to need to adjust that budget, or is that covered under that? Thank you.
That, what was set aside, what was budgeted for pay for performance doesn't need to be adjusted. That is, we're going to stay within that budgeted dollar amount that the board allocated. This does not, this is to put the employees on the wage grid, to merge the two pay plans and to get the employees onto the wage grid. Then if there is any pay for performance adjustment in 2013, it would be taken out of what was budgeted by the board. That will not have to be adjusted.
Thank you.
This is just to get the pay study implemented. Mhm.
Any additional comment or question, board members? If not, I believe we're ready to
Just one
proceed.
for me, Darrell.
Supervisor Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair of the administration committee, I've seen all the studies that they've done. We've worked on this, and I wholly support this. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem slanted and trying to slant anybody else. But thank you very much, Pat and Tammy, for presenting the facts, and I just want to say that I do support it. Thank you.
Are you ready? This is a resolution then that comes to us from the Administration Committee. This is presented on a motion from Supervisor Peterson, a second by Supervisor Osnes. This is a resolution that approves the non-exempt employee pay plan and adjustments. And board members, proceed to vote. And the resolution is approved with a 2/3 majority. Our final action item, and we're right on target. I would just say we've got a half an hour to deal with this one, and I don't think it's going to take a half an hour. But the only reason I say half an hour is that you're probably aware there's some other activity going on in this building right now, and looking at the agenda prior to today, it seemed to me that we could reasonably be done by 11 o'clock. And so based on that anticipated closure date, lunch is going to be served in this room to some of the people involved in the trial. So that's the only reason I say that. Not that we must be done by 11, but I think expeditiously we can be, because we spent about, 3.5 hours at the Committee of the Whole dealing with the information on the next item, so I think we can reasonably do that. Agenda item number 3 is a resolution amending rules and bylaws of the Board of Supervisors of St. Croix County. By way of background, you will recall from our lengthy discussion at the Committee of the Whole that this really is a compilation of items and changes that occurred over the whole last year. It is our practice to bring to the county board those changes in the rules and bylaws on an annual basis. So this takes all of that work that occurred over the last year and would, I think the phrase would be, Don, it would codify the changes into our rules and bylaws, and that's what's in front of us. And prior to moving forward, I also want to direct your attention to some information that was distributed, not in our board pack, but came just a little bit after. It was some work that was done by Corp Counsel, and I appreciate that. You will recall that we spent a considerable amount of time at the Committee of the Whole talking about the idea of public comment. And as we looked back at what the draft proposal said after we were done with the Committee of the Whole, in all candor, it looked a little bit confusing, and I think that Corp Counsel has done a good job of presenting what I think is a representation of our discussion that day that did not necessarily translate through in the language. So just by way of recapping, and I'm only bringing this to your attention, if you will get in front of you that 3-page memo that Corporation Counsel sent out. Essentially what this is intended to do is to capsulize the conversation that we had that day, which I think had a couple of key components. One, I think there was a clear consensus that we wanted to have the ability to have the public make comment and interact with us. We didn't want to unnecessarily put barriers there. And I think that our conversation also indicated that we saw a difference between committee meetings, which are more informal, and their work meetings where we're coming up with what probably is going to result in an action item in front of the board, which is a more formal setting, and it's a legislative body. For instance, today, we are in fact discussing 3 resolutions that are action items for the board that come from standing committees. So the proposal that Don has in front of you, I think, does a little better job than what we wound up with. So I'm recommending it to you for your consideration, and essentially it makes that distinction. At the very top, it is indicating that right now in our draft language, it says any public comment of the agenda, this is on standing committees and HHS, shall follow public comment period. Proposed is changing the any to the public comment period. And the difference between the two is that if you'll drop down to the bottom, in front of the meeting of a standing committee, the way we left it at the committee of the whole is that public comment may address items that are, may only address items that are not on the agenda. What is proposed is, and keep in mind, we're only talking about committees and HHS. This is not the board. As proposed, it would say that the public comment section, a person could, during the comment section on a standing committee or an HHS board, address anything. They could make a comment. We would not try and put burdens in front of them. If they wanted to make some comment, you know, that's really kind of at the discretion of the committee chair is going to control that, but they're there in a work session. However, when we got over to the county board, we seem to have clearly a difference of opinion with respect to a county board meeting, the more formal legislative body, as opposed to a standing committee. So the way we somewhat left it is that we would experiment with that. Now, that the word experiment doesn't translate through in the bylaws, but we were going to try that. We were going to experiment with it. So on the agenda today, for instance, we had a public comment section. Chair indicated this is only for items that are not on the agenda, keeping in mind open meeting requirements. We can't engage in any conversation on something that's not on the agenda. So we did experiment with it today. And we also indicated that if a person then wants to address an item that's on the agenda, which is currently the procedure that we have in our bylaws, it's rather lengthy, that certainly is possible. They fill out a comment card, they simply get the recognition and the authorization of their supervisor, and they're going to be able to speak to an item on the agenda at that time. So in the agenda, if someone had filled out that comment card, they would be recognized as the board got to that to discuss it. But as a result of that conversation that day, we eliminated the language. If you'll turn to page 3, we eliminated the language that laid that out. So the proposal that Don has sent, and frankly, as your board chair, I am recommending that we amend the draft that is coming to us today by adopting the proposal. That, of course, is going to be up to the board what you want to do. But I think that is crisper, cleaner, and I think it really reflects what it was that we wanted to do. So I don't want to discuss that. We're now going to move into discussion. I'm just making sure that you're up to speed with where we're at, and the board in its ultimate wisdom is going to do one or the other or something third. So, having said that, the action item that's in front of us is a resolution amending the rules and bylaws of the Board of Supervisors of St. Croix County, and the chair would entertain a motion. Motion from Travis and a second from Tim. And discussion. And keep in mind, the resolution that's in front of us is adopting the changes in the rules and bylaws. In other words, that whole big lengthy packet that we spent several hours talking about, that's what the resolution does. Supervisor Yard.
Does that include your comments of Mr. Gillen's additions here?
Negative. As presented, right now, the language would be the first column. If the board in its wisdom wants to change, as Corp Council has put together, that would require an amendment. If there's no action and the resolution is adopted, we don't adopt the proposal. That's where we're at. Supervisor Malik.
Then I move to amend the proposal that we currently have before us to add to or substitute the 3 pages that have been given to us in our handout this morning, with one exception. That exception is on the very first page, the word "any" stay where it was instead and not be replaced by the word "the." There's a second to my amendment. I will explain why I believe the right word is still "any."
You have us breathless with anticipation. Second from Supervisor Kiesler. And
Okay.
now we would
Here's the thing.
entertain your explanation.
Yeah, it was not the intention, as I understand it, that standing committees and the Health and Human Services Board must always have a public comment section. But if they choose to do so, then it would follow these rules that are here. That's why the word "any" is the right word. It allows for the possibility that there might not be a public comment period at some meeting of one of the committees or the Health and Human Services Board.
Supervisor Malik, I'm simply going to have Corp Counsel respond to that. Since he drafted the proposal, I'm inclined to agree with your logic. I'd like Corp Counsel to respond.
Well, I agree with Buck's logic too, except that my understanding was you'd have, the "the" would be in there because you would have public comment for every one of those meetings. I was under the assumption you'd want it at all those committee meetings in the Health and Human Services Board. It wouldn't be optional, it would be automatic.
I see. I thought we decided that it would be discretionary with the committees. Not every committee meeting, I would think, not every committee meeting is appropriate for a public comment, but let's see, I guess the Board of Adjustment, with which I'm the most familiar, of course, doesn't use public comments at all, except as they pertain.
Supervisor Malik, I inquire, would we consider under our bylaws, would we consider Board of Adjustment a standing committee of the board?
I don't know.
We're naming the standing committee as an HHS, so I don't think it would impact that.
It's just the ones that are made up only, well, it's the ones that are elected from the county board only. Those are the ones you call the standing committees. Okay.
And if I could clarify one thing, but you said you moved to amend the proposal to substitute the 3 pages. I assume you mean the proposed column of the 3 pages.
Right.
Supervisor Hood.
I'm just trying to recall the conversation during that lengthy meeting, and I think Buck's right there. I think it was, we were discussing that we want to have this available, but the chair of that subcommittee, it's up to him to decide whether he's going to have that public comment period or not. So I
Would
think
you be willing to specify him or her?
Or him or her, or her. My favorite friend here. So I think any would be more appropriate to what we discussed during the committee of the whole versus the.
I get the sense that, or I took away the consensus that it was going to be the expected thing, that there would be public comment periods at almost every meeting, but I guess I can imagine circumstances in which it would not be appropriate, and then you wouldn't want to have to go through a suspending the rules kind of drill in order to take it off, and it could come up at a time which is really awkward, after the meeting has started, and now and you got people in the audience who thought they were going to have public comment. I'm trying to imagine it, and I'm not succeeding, but I guess we've all seen stranger things happen, things that we can't anticipate, and so flexibility seems to me to be the appropriate way to go.
Would it be fair to say, Supervisor Malik, that as your proposal of changing that word provides us with more latitude, discretionary latitude?
Latitude and longitude.
I should know better than to try and get ahead of you. Any further discussion? The amendment that's in front of us would insert the 3 columns, and you see most of the language is identical. The differences are what are highlighted in yellow, or on page 3, it's restoring the language that right now is in our bylaws about the procedure to address with the comment. I sense that you are ready. Are you ready with
Mr. Chair?
this? Supervisor Rasmus?
That includes with the proposed side of it, we're going to take the out and insert any.
That is the amendment, yes. That is correct.
We need to vote first on the amendment.
That is correct. This comes to us, this is an amendment of the rules and bylaws as drafted and presented to us from the committee of the whole. This is on a motion by Supervisor Malik and a second by Supervisor Kiesler to, instead of the language in column 1 on 3 pages, it's the language in column 2 on all 3 pages, with the additional proviso of striking the word "the" and inserting the word "any." Supervisors, proceed to vote. And that is adopted, the amendment is adopted unanimously. We now have in front of us the complete draft. It's in your data packet. The draft now has been amended with the language that we just inserted. Discussion. Supervisor Schachner.
I just have a question on packet page 52, and it's page 13 of the bylaws. Why are we, I think I've missed it when we were talking about this in the committee of the whole, why are we removing county administrators recommending changes to the human resources handbook for county review?
Tell me again where that's at.
Packet page 52, it's the former item 12 that is being struck.
I think the reason that was removed was because it was felt that was an administrative decision as opposed to a policy decision.
Yeah. Supervisor Kiesler.
I'd like to offer an amendment.
Where are you at, sir?
Article 4.
Page.
I am on page 56, Article 4G2.
I'm not finding a 56. Page 17 of the rules and bylaws.
Yes, page 56 of the packet, I'm
Got it,
sorry.
all right.
Page 56 of the packet. 4G2. I'd like to insert after the word "by," insert committee chair and. So it would read, "The agenda of standing committees shall be prepared by the committee chair and the county administrator and approved by the committee chair." Two G.
Would you
What,
read
G,
that again,
section
please,
G, number
Supervisor Kiesler?
Excuse me?
Would you read that again, please?
The sentence would read, "The agenda of the standing committees shall be prepared by the committee chair and the county administrator and approved by the committee chair."
Okay, you've got the language. Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second it for discussion.
Second by Supervisor Osnes. Do you wish to speak to your amendment, Supervisor? Do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, just that I believe that it more accurately reflects where I think the intent of that was prior to its revision. Basically, that there was there's joint work done, and then the committee chair approves it.
Those of you that were at the committee of the whole meeting recall that this generated a considerable amount of discussion. We spent a lot of time on this, and I thought we had this one hashed out. Any additional discussion on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, I believe that you are ready to vote. This is an amendment in section G, number 2, the agenda of the standing committee. And I would have that read again. Would you read that, please?
Item 2, the agenda of standing committee meetings shall be prepared by, and then add the committee chair and then following the county administrator and approved by the committee chair.
Are you ready? I am. Board members will proceed to vote, and this is on the amendment only that was just proposed. Proceed to vote. And that amendment fails. We are back to the draft of the rules and bylaws as amended one time. Any additional discussion or conversation? Supervisor Schachner.
I would like to offer up an amendment to
Identify where you are at.
back to page 52, which is bylaws, page 13. I would like to reinsert the review the county administrator's recommended changes to the human resources handbook.
Line 12?
Line 12, well, former line 12, yes.
That was stricken and you want to add it back in?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Your amendment is to restore the language.
Yes.
This is on bylaw page 13.
Page 13, packet page 52, and it would be item 12, former item 12, which is currently has a line through it.
Is there a second to that proposed amendment?
I'll second it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you did do that. I missed that. Discussion.
I guess the reason that, to justify this, I guess the reason that I think that we, as a board, need to approve any changes is I view this board as the end stop for the employees of the county. We are, as a board, we are employers, and it is important that we not only review but also approve the changes that are being done. We are the people above Mr. Thompson.
Supervisor, I believe this would have the effect of restoring that language to a standing committee. We are talking here of the duties of the administration committee?
Yes. I believe that it is important that members of that committee also, I believe that the committee needs to be approving it.
Additional discussion. Supervisor Ring.
It seems to me it is a policy document, and the board looks at policy. I guess I'd like to hear from Mr. Thompson about that. What's your thought on this?
Well, it's more operational in nature than it is policy. You know, possibly you could pull this item, and if you wanted to look at that, if the administration committee wants to, you know, pour through that handbook and look at it and, you know, make a judgment call on whether it's operational or policy, we could have that discussion, you know, within your committee. But based on my review of the handbook, it's very operational. So, but, you know, there again, if the committee wants to look at it and kind of weigh in, we could do that. I'm not opposed to that. If you wanted to pull this item and, you know, take it up in the future, but based on my review and based on Tammy Funk's work with the handbook, it's operational in nature, and any changes to it, that could be a monthly, you know, monthly assignment at each of those committee meetings. Start pouring through that handbook to make changes. So, but, you know, it's the call of the board, and maybe you want to look at that manual, pour through it, and weigh in whether or not you believe it's operational or policy. But I don't know if Tammy wants to speak specifically to it, but that's more of a general statement.
While she's coming forward, Supervisor Osnes.
Just a question maybe for Don. Could this item be postponed right now and taken up later?
Well, you'd have to have something in here. You can always review the rules and bylaws again, you know, every year, so it can be modified again next year.
Go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in what gets referred to as either the employee handbook, or then it says human resources policies and procedures. I'm actually in the process of really planning to take it apart, because there's a lot of things in there that don't pertain to what you would call an employee handbook. We're in the process of kind of creating a library of documents and policies and procedures, which is really internal resources for department heads. This is how I request a temporary position. This is how I request reclassification. So there's an entire section that is really administrative policies. How do they handle those things? Affirmative action policy, equal opportunity. I mean, those are kind of required things in there. Then the only part that pertains to the employee handbook is overtime, those benefits that you were asking about, Agnes, we, describe. Here's what's available to you in terms of health insurance. Here's when you're eligible. So that part is really an employee handbook. So, I mean, I would agree with Pat that a lot of it is just operational and how we administer things. We have continued, even though not required for authorization or approval, to still bring brand new policies to the admin committee. I mean, I think we showed them the cell phone policy, the social media policy, just to keep the group informed, and then we insert the applicable section of that. What's an employee's expectation in terms of privacy with a cell phone, when to use a work cell phone. So those are all the kinds of details of examples that are in what you kind of think about as the employee handbook. So,
Supervisor Kiesler.
I guess it's a question in terms of, it just says review the county's administrator's recommendations. It doesn't say review and approve. So I don't get it, I guess, in terms of, we can review at any time. It's online. It's, you can have access to it. So unless you're going to amend it to say review and approve, like, Tammy said, it goes to the admin committee, and if it were that big of a change, I would imagine they would bring it to the full county board for action of some nature. So that's my only question is, if we're not looking to review and approve what is being recommended, I'm not sure what the issue is, quite frankly.
Supervisors, you know that I'm generally reluctant to comment on issues, and I try not to do that, in spite of the fact that my colleague Supervisor Malik tried to get me an opportunity before and referred to the fact that I've been around for a long time. I think he simply meant that I was old. But I can on this one, by way of background, just indicated that I have been around long enough to know when we used to call it finance and personnel. And I was on that committee for a number of years and chaired finance and personnel, and I can tell you I have no interest in going back to the days when we waded through that minutia. It is detail that the committee does not have to plow around in my view. Policy matters still are going to come before this board, but the administrative matters are frankly mind-numbing sometimes, and I have no interest in going back to that personally. Supervisor Malik.
Yet I think no one would deny that if one or more supervisors wish to review this document and ask the administration committee to put it on their agenda for review of a particular topic or the whole thing, anything at all, it would happen.
It would happen.
You know, so it's not as though having that line not in the list of duties means that it's no longer germane for that committee to do so at any time it wants to. So I guess I will vote against the proposed amendment with the understanding that that doesn't mean that the committee has been ousted of its jurisdiction over that topic anytime it wants to delve into it.
Any additional discussion on the proposed amendment? The amendment that's in front of us comes to us on a motion from Supervisor Schachner, second by Supervisor Ring. Agnes, if you'll get that in. This is a vote on the amendment only. This is on page 13, page 13 of the rules and bylaws, and it's number 12. The amendment is to restore the language that at our committee, the whole meeting, as a result of that, it's out. Supervisors, proceed to vote. And it does fail. And even lost either the presenter or the seconder of the motion.
Could we do the main motion now?
I'm about to inquire. I'm about to inquire. Board members, we have proposed several changes. We have made one, and in front of you right now is an amended draft. Are you ready to proceed to a vote? The body language indicates that you are. We are now back to needing to get the second in. And this is a resolution adopting the rules and bylaws of the Board of Supervisors of St. Croix County. This does require a 2/3 vote, just so you're aware. It takes 2/3 of the county board to change the rules and bylaws, so this will require a 13 affirmative votes. Supervisor
And
York.
this does include Mr. Gillen's addition?
That amendment has already been adopted. That is in. So we are adopting the rules and bylaws as amended today. Board members, proceed to vote. And it is adopted with 2/3. Do you have any correspondence to bring to our attention or any rezoning requests?
I have nothing to report.
I'm not aware of any announcements for the good of the order. Board members, our agenda is completed and we're adjourned.